Hey everybody, and welcome to Dominion Cards, the video series where we take a strategic, in-depth look at various cards from the board game Dominion. Today we're looking at a Monument. This is a 4-cost action card from Prosperity, and it says +2 coins and +1 victory point token. So what is a victory point token? So these are tokens that are each worth 1 victory point. There is technically an infinite number of them in the supply, and there's no upper limit on how many of them you can have. So this will always work, this effect. You'll always gain a point when you play Monument. So victory point tokens are a way of earning points that don't add victory cards into your deck. And usually that's good because the vast majority of victory cards don't do anything in your deck and get in the way, right? By adding victory cards into your deck, you reduce the deck quality. That is, of course, usually why you're going for like provinces instead of estates, right? Because they just all get in the way, but that's not the case with victory point tokens. Now, for Dominion in general, the pace of the game is set by the players because the thing that triggers the end of the game is when certain cards are taken out of the supply. Right, so Monument is a source of points that doesn't actually require you to keep gaining any more cards or change your deck composition. Right, you could have turns where you just play a bunch of Monuments and then just don't buy anything. And what that means is that, in theory, Monument can technically provide an unlimited number of points. You can just choose to keep gaining points forever with Monument, right, and not ever bring the game to a close. Like, all of the players on the table could do that, right? However, of course, in practice, because Monument only gives you 1 point at a time, Monument is really slow. And so if you wanted Monument to be like an infinite source of points, you would have to drag the game out for a very long time. Now, the reason why this sort of doesn't work is because if, for example, we look at the province pile, if you lose the split 5-3 in a 2-player game, that puts you 12 points behind. You would need to play Monuments 12 times in order to catch up with a gap that big. And playing any action card 12 times is really difficult. Yeah, you can have multiple copies, but you'd need a lot of Monuments to be able to get 12 plays out of Monument within a reasonable length of time, right? This is a huge amount of points that you would need. So, yeah, Monument is quite slow when you think of it in that regard. And that's why you sort of can't go infinite with it, because it just takes way too long and people will just buy provinces and beat you resoundly. So what does Monument do? What's its purpose? Well, what it does is, fundamentally, it pushes kingdoms towards building an engine. This is because the more plays you get out of a Monument, like the more points that you're going to get from it. So, of course, engines, the ones that try and play all of the cards in your deck every turn, they get the most out of every individual card that they add. So Monument is just way better for an engine player than it is for anyone else. Now, of course, as a general rule with any card that wants to be played a lot, it tends to get much stronger with Throne Room and its variants around, particularly King's Court, that's available in Prosperity. This is because these get you more plays out of your other cards, but they also do it in a way that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to clog up your deck with lots of stock cards. You can look back at the Throne Room video, but essentially Throne Room, early on in your turn, it acts a bit like an engine component because you'll be throning your draw cards in your villages, and then once you've drawn your deck, any ones that are left now act more like Monuments. So you don't clog your deck up as much as well. Because that's a problem, because Monument is a stop card. If you wanted to throw a load into your deck, they all just sort of get in the way and you stop being able to draw your deck. But cards like Throne Room both get you the plays, and they sort of solve that problem. So always watch out for these sorts of cards when Monument is available. Engines also get clogged up by victory cards a lot more harshly than a more treasure-based strategy. And if you have a really long, drawn-out game that goes into slowly buying all of the duchies because no one dares take the remaining provinces, engines can sometimes start to struggle. Every individual card that you add to an engine, or like a stock card, is more impactful to the engine than it is to a deck where a player has never trashed and they got all of their coppers still around and they're just slowly cycling. That's because the player who has way more cards cycles slowly, so he doesn't see the stock cards as often. And also, proportionally, that victory card is less of an impact in their deck. whereas someone playing the engine will draw that stop card every time. So Monument allows the engine to essentially get less clogged up by victory cards, because it doesn't need to buy as many, because it gets this source of points that doesn't involve adding victory stop cards to it. And also it gives more time for building by essentially slowly accumulating points in a way that, means that the other player has to buy more victory cards to overcome. So when is Monument good? So there's a couple of situations where Monument works pretty well. Sometimes it's pretty hard to draw your deck and increase your hand size. For example, there might be no what we call draw cards, where your hand size goes up after you played it, but you might have a lot of cantrips. In this sort of situation, Monument's pretty good, because in the long term, you will be adding less stop cards to your deck by buying less victory cards. And so this can keep your engine going for longer. Like, the big problem with stuff like Cantrip Kingdoms, like if you only ever have a 5-card hand at all times, like at most, as soon as you add your 5th stop card to the deck, there's no guarantee you will draw it all anymore. So not having to buy as many can be nice, and you can still churn through the deck and get a bunch of plays of Monument. Like, it stops you having to go in and start buying estates, which kill those decks completely. Monument is an action form of money. It is essentially a terminal silver that gives you a point. And some cards really like it when your money comes in action form, like Draw to X or Scrying Pool. Now, as a action card of money, Monument's okay, right? Like, it's giving you points when you play it. And so in these decks that really want to be playing a bunch of these like fairly weak action cards but that give them a bunch of money, like, this is a pretty good one compared to many other forms of like money that you can get. These sorts of decks are also particularly susceptible to clogging on victory cards, because they get in the way of like your scrying pools and your draw to X, and so Monument again works really well in these sorts of decks. Monument is also very good in games that have low or no additional buys or gains. So the reason for this is because, let's say you got a game with no plus buy. The best sort of outcome that you tend to be getting there is 1 province per turn. And let's assume you don't have like Artisan to gain duchies, like you don't have a workshop to gain estates. Like, the best that you would do from your turn is generate 8 money and buy a province and get 6 points. Well, the problem with these sorts of things, these sorts of decks, you can't necessarily build very well as well, so you sort of end up running very quickly for like diving for provinces, and it's highly likely that you might end up splitting the pile with your opponent. And in that case, suddenly tiebreakers matter quite a lot. Like, the sorts of games where you tend to end up in these long, protracted, like gaining of victory points, sometimes tends to be these ones with low gains, because you can't build a strong engine. There just isn't the time, because you can't add enough engine components to your deck. And also, there's no point in building super big, because you only get so much output. So Monument works really well in these cases, because you are sort of still going a little bit for an engine. It's just limited in its output, and Monument giving you those extra points really works against the fact that you can't gain more points in any other way. So Monument, of course, isn't always good. In fact, there are plenty of times when Monument's not good at all. So here are some examples of times when Monument is bad. So Monument, as we've explained, isn't really a good substitution for losing the province or the colony split or whatever other powerful victory card there is. Losing these splits sets you back a lot of points, and so Monument is just too slow to get you those points, to catch up on those. Monument as a payload doesn't escalate with repeated plays on one turn in a way that something like Bridge does. Like, if you had one player trying to play a load of bridges and the other player trying to play a load of monuments, then you will find that the bridge player will most likely win, because they will just buy out all of the provinces in one turn and just gain a huge amount of points that the monument player just wasn't really able to compete with, because it was too slow, just wasn't enough points as fast. So what this means is that Monument isn't necessarily going to compete very well with other better forms of payload, of which there are many. Obviously, Bridge is a particularly strong example that I tend to use in these videos, but, Monument, it's only really okay as a payload, basically. But if you have some strong draw, and you can easily handle many stop cards, then a Monument can be inefficient due to how slow it is. So, it's only giving you 2 money on a play and 1 point, and that's nowhere nearly as fast as just like throwing a bunch of provinces and duchies into your deck. And if you can handle that, get the golds, get the provinces, get the duchies, and you don't have problems with clogging your deck, well, Monument, it's not doing any good for you there. Monument is also quite expensive on plus actions. It is a terminal. It costs an action for each one you play, and you have to do what I call paying the terminal tax if you want a lot of terminal actions in your deck. Right? Each turn, how do I explain this? Each turn you get 1 free action to play, but if you want to play more than 1 terminal card, you got to start investing in villages, and that just means that these cards get more expensive. And if you consider that, as a terminal, Monument is therefore a little bit more expensive than it looks, you may find that this actually isn't doing you sort of as much value, and maybe you would rather get your money from like silvers and not have to invest in also buying villages as well. Like, that is a case where sometimes you're just struggling with actions, like you're spending all of your actions on drawing and then you haven't got any left for Monument. Well, Monument is not really the best payload around, so again, it's going to struggle. Like, sometimes it really likes having a lot of actions for free, basically, or at least at very low cost. So when do you go around gaining Monument? So Monument has a trade-off. You kind of want to buy it late because it's a payload card and it's not providing you any deck control, right? It is basically just a stop card. Terminal silver until the game is over, because the points aren't doing anything for you technically until the game ends. People respond differently to someone who has a lot of points in terms of what cards they buy at the end of the game. But, in practice, those points are not doing anything for you in the here and now. But at the same time, you also want to buy Monument early. You want to buy it early because the more times you play it, the more points you get. So the earlier you get your Monuments, the more time you have to start accumulating more points from it. In practice, you typically tend to only buy it later as payload, and that is because you have other priorities for your actions early on. But I have seen situations where I do get Monument earlier, and that tends to be the boards where gains are limited, and that is just because each point matters more. So in that situation where you really care about the points for like tiebreakers, because you think you're going to split provinces and the best outcome of your deck is just buying like 1 province a turn, in these situations, even estates are good, and so Monument being like estates without the deck clogging, that's a case where Monument, you would actually get it earlier because you want to get that point lead because it means so much. So in summary, Monument, it's a payload card, but it's on the weaker side. Community rankings put it somewhere within the bottom 30% of Kingdom cards. It is a very slow source of points, so to give you a comparison, like other cards that accumulate your points over time but may do so slowly can be like Gardens on certain boards. Right, obviously it can also be good on those, but Monument might sort of compare in terms of the speed at which the points in your deck accumulate. Monument promotes engines, gives you more time to build, gives you long-term reliability, but it's a case of how much time do you really have and how much value are you getting out of it? And that's very Kingdom dependent, so I can't give you very specific examples on that, but that's the sort of things that you should be thinking of with Monument. Okay, so that's it for Monument. So what we're going to do now is head over to the online client, and we are going to play some games with Monument forced in, and we will see what impact it has on those kingdoms. So in this one here, I see straight away we have Chapel for trashing, very strong card that draws my eye straight away. We've got Native Village and Village as villages, so that's pretty good. The draw is not quite so great. We have got Ghost Ship that's pretty good, and we've got Vault, which is not necessarily going to be good because we're going to have low hand sizes every turn. But yeah, so the drawing here is tight. Village is a lot nicer than Native Village. The only plus buy is Trade Route, which is really bad. So we have pretty limited gains. And so Chapel is good, but our deck is like low gains and also low drawing potential. However, Ghost Ship, even if we get off just one Ghost Ship per turn, like that's really good. So we definitely want to do the thinning with Chapel and getting villages and drawing a little bit with Ghost Ship. And once we're there, I think you have the time to start investing in a bunch of monuments. Now, the alternative is Bureaucrat and then bishoping the silvers, but that doesn't feel very good. It's also worth noting that we have havens to potentially like keep provinces out of our deck. So what I think we actually can do, and there's also like Vault to get some value out of that, but how much money do we need? So I think what we do is we Chapel down. We're going to have Village, Ghost Ship as like draw, and then we're going to get more villages and maybe some native villages, and we're going to try and use Monument as our primary source of payload. Because we're limited in gains, Monument is quite good. There is very high incentive to build the engine anyway due to Ghost Ship, and as a result, Monument gives us the best payload for that engine. Now, we don't really need more than 4 monuments, because that gets us to 8 money, and that gets us to province. And Trade Route is hard to justify because after a certain point, what are we trashing with it to get the extra buy? Chapel has already thinned us very much. So yes, I think Monument is key here. I think this and Ghost Ship, these are your payload cards. And you're actually going to get quite a couple of points. You know, if we can play 4 monuments per turn, that's really good. And we will definitely catch up and beat any opponent who tries to do something otherwise. Like, they can't just do like Vault, big money, because Ghost Ship will destroy them. And Bureaucrat won't be good for them because we're not actually going to have that many provinces, and maybe we can even, over time, tuck them away with havens, but, you know, that's only if we've got a lot of time to build, I think, because it's very slow accumulating havens. So no, Monument's really good on this board, actually. This is a fantastic board for Monument. I suspect we will end up with quite a lot of points from Monument. So on this kingdom here, let's see, we have Sentry for trashing. I guess there's technically Island as well, and Transmute? Definitely not Transmute. So we can get thin. We have, like, what's our draw? So there is no draw at all. There is Peddler, but there's also no plus buy. So the question now becomes, is it even worth thinning? Like, the payload on this board is very bad. We have Sea Hag, Pirate Ship, Navigator, Monument, Island. Like, there is Vineyard, but it's actually hard to accumulate enough action cards for Vineyard to be good. So we do want some trashing with Sentry, because if we don't get it, then Sea Hag becomes a problem. I don't think we worry about Sea Hag in this case, and I think we get Sentry anyway, just because it's nice to get rid of those, nice to get rid of the coppers. Now, Pirate Ship is no good. We can get rid of our coppers, and we have alternate forms of money in terms of Fishing Village and Monument, and like Navigator and Peddler. And I think what we do is we're sort of kind of doing the same thing, where we've got very low gaining opportunity. So we are going to play a bunch of monuments, and we're going to do that based off of Fishing Village, but we can only do so much. So we're going to have some peddlers, some fishing villages, and maybe we only have like 1 or 2 monuments. And perhaps if we need to, we can alternate between buying like province and island. Like, it depends really on what our opponent does. Depends on how fast we need to gun for provinces. But anytime we miss province, there's island, and that can help keep us clean. But also there's Sentry to like discard past provinces. So the engine works sort of okay. We can't play as many monuments as the last one, but I think we still want to use monument. Like, the other payload cards here, like Sea Hag, Pirate Ship, Navigator, they're all very bad, basically. Like, they don't work very well here. Admittedly, Sea Hag's cursing, Sentry doesn't like it. Sentry can't trash the curses before they get drawn, so that's actually quite harsh. However, maybe I could see that actually you do want one Sea Hag, but I might prefer it that I sort of just double down initially on sentries. So I actually open like Monument Fishing Village and I double down on sentries, and the curses sort of don't matter that much. And I start looking to like play sentries, get some peddlers, and Sea Hag, it just doesn't seem worth it to me. But I can always trash it later. But anyway, I think Monument is another decent one here. And we're going to be ignoring Potion unless the game goes on really, really long. But I can't imagine that it will. And we're just going to be slowly accumulating points with Monument. I think that's because there's no enablers for a like treasure-based strategy here, so you sort of have to do the weaker engine, and it's just sort of a slow, long game, but that's still the best thing to do. Like, you will, in the long term, outscore anyone who's just doing like big money here. Like, you will do better than them. So, yeah, it's just a slow engine, fairly weak engine, and Monument works well for that. What have we got here? So we have Expand, Trading Post, Bishop, Mine. These are all cards that can trash. It is worth noting that there is no village here, so that's quite bad for Monument. What are good things to spend my action on? There is Expand. What would I do with Expand? I might have a trading post and have a lot of silvers. Would you really expand them into harems? I'm not sure that you would, but you could do. Surely there's something better. Like, is Ironworks good here? I don't think so. Maybe Apothecary is better, and it's not worth taking the time to trash. Bishop doesn't seem like it's going to be that good. You could gain stuff with Ironworks and then trash it with Bishop, but you're only playing one per turn, and you have to line them up, and there's sort of no real support to line them up. So that doesn't feel great. I'm sort of okay with the idea of actually having apothecaries here and just having some stuff left over. Like, maybe you have apothecary. Would you do apothecary Baron? I guess you could technically collide Baron and estate fairly easily, and you might actually be able to just rush provinces reasonably well. And maybe you could have an expand. But I don't know. So what's the alternative to that? The alternative is that we have a trading post to like turn our cards slowly into silver, but that does seem quite slow. Anyway, in either case, I don't think I like Monument here. It doesn't really seem to be doing very much. Now again, gains are a little bit limited. However, I think, you've got plus buy with Baron, and you're never actually building to a double province turn, but I think our deck could be good enough with Apothecary to just hit 8, and we basically are gunning for winning the province split. And, what are the alternatives to if you might be losing the province split? There's Harem, which is quite bad. It takes too long with Trading Post Expand. There's Monument, which again is too slow. There's Bishop, which again is sort of too slow. I suppose the only other thing is if your opponent does Bishop, like, would you want to be trashing coppers? Or I don't think you do. I think you just stick around with Apothecary. So I think Apothecary Baron is probably what I'm doing, and I'm not actually gaining much else. Like, I open Potion, and I guess I take a silver, and I will be buying some Apothecaries, and maybe I could have an Expand thrown in as well, and I could turn some estates maybe into what? I don't know. Maybe I don't want anything duchies late game. I might be able to expand provinces and mill them, but I don't know. Very weak, but Monument just feels pretty bad to me here. Big money Monument is not very good either. I think Apothecary would just be a lot faster. And yeah, I think Baron is just going to be nicer because I want to spike 8 a lot. And Apothecary sort of helped me a little bit on that. Okay, what about this kingdom? So there is Moneylender to trash, and you can use Vault. to discard for money. There is Mining Village and Native Village and Fishing Village, so they're very good villages. There is also Minion and Watchtower as like draw to X. So we can actually do a bunch with Vault here. You can use like Minion, Vault and Village to get a lot of money, but the key thing here is that there is no plus buy. So we've actually got huge ways to generate a lot of money with Minion and Vault, but you don't actually care that much to generate that much money. So that's unfortunate because there's no colony platinum in any of these games so far, so province is the best you can do. In the face of that, what do we want to do? With no other source of plus gain, I am again looking at Monument because all of the other forms of payload that we have, all they do is earn us money, and I guess there's the Minion attack as well. So I do like the look of Monument here. This is sort of the only gaining that we're doing is gaining victory point tokens. So I think I open with Moneylender and I want to get thin, and it is definitely worth trying to build a deck that has Fishing Village, Minion, and I might even have Watchtower is quite useful in this case. Just you can use it as you draw to X. You don't really need Vault. And we will be using the slow accumulation of villages and minions and probably going Monument. And long term, maybe I don't have 4 monuments, but maybe I do as well. Maybe I just use all the other cards. Well, you know, we have Fishing Village that's also getting us money, and it doesn't seem worth building beyond having 8 money. Like, as soon as you're consistently getting 8 money, you might as well start going for provinces. But I think that Monument is actually a reasonable way of getting there. Do we want Talisman to help us gain, like, villages and watchtowers and monuments? I think so. I think Talisman could be good here, but we don't get it. We get Moneylender first, and then we pick up a Talisman and we could get a bunch of fishing villages or a bunch of watchtowers or both early on, and then when our deck's in control, you know, we're adding monuments to it fairly quickly, and it would be nice to have at least 1 minion to actually attack our opponent. But then again, there's also Watchtower, so maybe it doesn't matter. Yeah, so maybe it's Talisman, Monument, Moneylender, Fishing Village, Watchtower, maybe Mining Village, and we sort of just aren't using the other bits, really. But yeah, this is no gains, so Monument works out here. All the other payload is just money, so you might as well use Monument for your money, right? Get those points. So, the 5th and final kingdom. We have no trashing at all. And we've got cards like Library and Vassal, but they don't really like having no trashing. And the only village is Festival, which in the absence of trashing is quite harsh to use. So, we've also got Colony Platinum for the first time here. Oh, I said there's no trashing. There is transmute, but it's not real trashing, is it? Because you're stuck with all these golds and duchies. Now, it is interesting that there are duchies because there is Duke. However, you have to trash a lot of action cards, and you can't really get thin. You can't trash your coppers because they turn into like transmutes, and it's really terrible. So we're just going to write off trashing here. You know, we can't use transmute for it. Now, trying to build an engine feels too slow. There's buy with Pawn and Festival, but the coppers really hurt. Like, you can't really do the Vassal thing. There's Poacher, which is actually okay. In fact, interestingly, you can discard the coppers and draw up with Library by using Poacher to discard, but do the piles empty quickly enough? So I'm wondering, with Harem and Duke, is Duchy Duke reasonable? But the problem is that there's also Colony. And so if this wasn't a colony board, I might Harem Duke and just do a Duchy thing. And I might even have a Monument just for a couple of extra points, because why not? But because there is Colony Platinum, I am now wondering if that is actually going to be a lot better. Because this board really doesn't want me to build the engine. It's too terrible. Like, Festival Library doesn't really work here, I don't think. Either we expect the game to go really long, in which case Poacher starts discarding cards and Festival Library suddenly might start working okay, or we have to try and figure something else. So what's the best way of getting up to platinum? Let's say that we are avoiding the engine. What do we do? Like, can you merchant ship big money to go up to platinum and then colony? Like, that doesn't feel very good. But I'm not sure what else you would be doing. Anyway, I'd probably open with monument in any case here, because what else am I going to do on an opening 4? Right, even if I open 5, I'm probably still just buying monument. Or maybe you get like merchant ship on a 5. You see, I really want to do the Duchy Duke, but I just know in the face of colony it's not even necessarily that good. And like, there are no particularly good Duke enablers here in reality. Like, there's merchant ship, there's harem, like they're decent, I guess, with Duke, but they don't particularly enable it in any way. So, this is kind of just a big money board with some sad things. I mean, library is fine as a big money card. You know, treasure based, you just draw up and you don't draw any action cards dead. And you just have a bigger hand size, and that gets you to platinum, and you're just buying good treasures. Like, maybe that's it. Maybe that's all we do. Like, we have poachers, we have libraries, and we can skip drawing any poachers dead. Maybe, and eventually, who knows, maybe they start to discard and the libraries get a little bit better. I think that might be all we're doing. And yeah, get gold, get platinum, go up to colony. I think you can't beat colony here, so do I actually want monument in that case? Maybe I would prefer to have poacher. Interesting, but no, I think I'd still have a monument. I might open with 1. I don't know if I'd get any more than that. Just get a couple of extra points, really, because we're not double colonying, and having the extra points is actually fairly useful there. But, you know, I can see the argument here that Duchy Duke wins, in which case I probably don't change my mind on monument. I have like 1, maybe eventually I want merchant ship and harems and stuff. But, you know, some monuments is fine for Duchy Duke, I guess. Yeah, so weird board. Anyway, that was all for monument. As you can see, this was actually really good for monument, actually. These kingdoms, like, monument seemed a lot better than it normally is. There are a bunch of strong engines, especially when you start adding like more powerful later expansions, where you're just not really touching monument. But monument has its day, and we actually saw it quite a bit here. So perhaps these random kingdoms over-represented monument a little bit than they should have. Anyway, I hope this was useful for you. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.